Amid the draconian policies being imposed, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, along with the Canadian Bill of Rights, have been enshrined. So, what does this really mean for Canadians, as they continue to roar that their rights and freedoms are being violated? Simply put, they don't exist. You have no rights, and you have no freedoms. The only rights and freedoms you have are those the government chooses to give you. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe said it the best, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. The content you are about to see and hear will enlighten you to the illusionary state of cognitive dissonance that has infectiously caused normalcy bias and why society is finding it difficult to comprehend that such a terrible regime could actually exist in Canada. Dennis Shaw, former president of the BC Refederation Party, had this to say regarding the Canadian Constitution.
We are in quite a constitutional mess in this country. And as a matter of fact, I'm not the only person saying that. There was a member of Parliament a few years ago who actually wrote a book, Canada, Country Without a Constitution. And so I researched it and wondered what we could do about it. Politicians should be the servants of the people. And right now we all know that politicians take no notice whatsoever of the people. And that is because the system, the way it's set up, allows them to do that. We have to change the system.
Yeah, and also what you were mentioning about our Constitution here in Canada, I know you and I had a gigantic conversation more than once. Could you actually quickly tell our listening audience a little bit about how the 1982 Constitution is an act of Parliament and is not done by the people?
Yes, that is the basic problem in this country. Canada has no Constitution. The Canadian situation is that this country used to be a colony of the United Kingdom, or Britain. And in 1931, that changed. The people of Canada became a sovereign people, and they were no longer ruled by the British. The situation at that stage, which was in 1931, the Statute of Westminster, the situation was that the day before, the Canadian government got its authority to govern this country from the British. The moment the British pulled out, the question is then, from where does the government of Canada get its authority to rule? Well, what happened, what should have happened, is that the people should have exercised their, what they call their inherent right to choose their form of government in a democracy. They should have been asked and they should have voted on it. That never happened. What did happen is that the very next day, after Canada became a sovereign nation, the government just carried on as it had before, but without any authority to govern, and has never asked the people for permission to govern them, which is what should happen in a democracy. The government right now has been operating from 1931 up till 1982, when Trudeau brought in the Constitution Act of 1982. What they should have done was ask the people for authority to govern, and they never did. What they did was they wrote the Constitution Act, which is a statute, and the politicians passed this statute, and it set up the form of government for Canada. The way the politicians wanted it, gives them all the power, gives the people no power. It's as simple as that. And they refer to, everybody around us refers to the Constitution. There is no Constitution, because what they mean by that is the Constitution Act of 1982. And an act is simply a statute that has been passed by a bunch of politicians. The only definition of a constitution is a charter of government deriving its whole authority from the people, from the governed. And if we had that, we would have a democracy. But of course we don't. We don't have a constitution. We're ruled by an act passed by the politicians to give all the power to the politicians and to make us obey the politicians. That's the situation in Canada.
So in 1960, when the Bill of Rights was passed by the Diefenbaker government, and 1982, when Trudeau brought in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which not only gave the Native Americans, recognized the Native Americans, allowed them to give them the right to vote, it recognized bilingualism in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So all of that stuff passed by our government actually is not a law at this time, because our government did not have the authority to pass it.
the government has never had authority from the people to govern, to pass laws. No. It's an incredible situation. The Australians, the New Zealanders, and the Canadians are in the same boat. And in Australia, a group got together and queried their constitution too. Let's go back to the Constitution Act, 1982, that Trudeau brought in. There are two parts to that. One is, as you just mentioned, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, as they call it. The other part is the old BNA, the British North America Act, under which Canada was ruled until we became free from Britain. That BNA is still in effect today. You read the Constitution Act 1982, if you get a copy, you will see the first section is the BNA. In the BNA, the section dealing with the Governor-General,
Section 12.
Section 12, exactly, was put in when Britain ruled Canada, and they ruled Canada with the aid of a Governor-General. They were in Britain, we were in Canada, and the Governor-General was here, and he did what the Brits told him to do, and he ruled this country. That still applies today. That's in the BNA, and it's still in the Constitution Act 1982. This Section 12, it is the longest English sentence I've ever come across, and it is the hardest to understand. It'll take you half an hour to figure it out. But what it says after you've figured it out is that the Governor-General of Canada has total power and authority over everything and everybody in Canada. Take my word for it. The Governor-General had every right to tell the Prime Minister what to do. It is a total comical farce, actually, because the Governor-General is appointed by the Prime Minister. A lot of people don't know this. In the old days, the Governor-General, when Britain ruled this country, the Governor-General was appointed by a letter patent. There have been no letters patent signed by Britain since somewhere early in the 1900s. Around 1947, the Canadian Prime Minister Mackenzie King then wanted to appoint a Governor-General. But he could not get a letter patent from England because England no longer had anything to do with Canada. We were sovereign. And he solved the problem very simply. He wrote his own letter patent. You can find it on the web. I've got a copy in my house here. He wrote it saying that I appoint so-and-so to be Governor-General of Canada. And he wrote it in such a way that it sounded as though the Brits had written it. And that started the system then of Canadian prime ministers appointing the Governor-General on their own without the Brits. And that's what happens today. So we have a Prime Minister who actually, in my opinion, is a total dictator and runs everything in Canada, appointing a Governor-General under Section 12 who has total authority over Canada. What a mess. And the people have nothing to say about any of this. In 1871, when we joined Confederation, the British were ruling us, of course, and they ruled us through the Governor-General, who was in Ottawa. Now, in each province, as they joined, they created a lieutenant governor who obeyed the Governor-General, who obeyed the Queen.
We are living under a dictatorial regime. It is for this reason that Canadians are being manipulated on a day-to-day basis, feeling that their rights and freedoms are being violated. Essentially, rights and freedoms are not violated, as long as the public continues to accept their infrastructure. Hence, due to the public's unawareness of the truth, the government has continued to strip the taxpayers' funds and repeatedly imposes more draconian policies upon the people. Simply put, they have been extorting the people's money for decades and the people say and do nothing about it. It is for this reason that Canada has largely remained a multicultural society, bringing immigrants into this country, as they are unaware of their fraudulent political construct. Society is led to believe that statutes are laws. This is a deceitful fallacy. A statute is defined as a legislated rule of society which has the force of law, but only within a society. Therefore, what is a society? The definition of a society has been given as a number of people, joined by mutual consent, to deliberate, determine and act for a common goal. Clearly, these statutes only have the force of law over those who have consented to be a member of the society governed by those statutes. Consent is a tricky legality concept in itself. It does not require a positive confirmation from you. Your silence and indecisiveness suffice to raise the appearance of consent. Hence, this is what is meant by the term, silence implies consent. Consequently, Anything with the word act in its title is an act of the Parliament or a legislature, and is in fact a statute. The simple fact is you have the right to exist without those statutes having the force of law. Perhaps Jesus spoke of not being of the existing kingdom. He may have been referring to not being a member of society, the magistrates presiding in those days. Is a marriage license required in order to marry lawfully? The government will tell you that you do. Once again, this is a fallacy. You have the right to live together and state your intent to the community, and you are in effect married. This is known as a common law marriage. If you do it through the government, you are entering into a three-way contract. Keep in mind, having a driver's license, for example, is a privilege, not a right. Therefore, when did we the people give permission to be governed in this manner? If you wish to download a free copy of this publication, you can do so by visiting www.kyprios.ca/insightmax.